I recorded the first full week of trading we got to start 2023, so let's get into how we did to start the new trading year. Starting with the first Monday, there were surprisingly a ton of gaps this morning with a handful of interesting ones, one of them being this CHS. Gap down this morning, not quite clearing major support, but like the shock value there. So I was trying it under the 2-minute bar, but wasn't getting filled. So tried it on both platforms until I realized it hasn't opened yet, even though the market has. I can tell because as you can see, the volume hasn't come in at all. So I just ended up canceling my orders and moved on. But then about half an hour later, I noticed the CHS from this morning popped up in my account. This has happened to me before on E-Trade, where I canceled the order, but later it appears in my account and shows that I did in fact get filled from earlier. And of course, rarely do these kind of incidents go in my favor, so I didn't have much choice but to just close out of the position. And usually if it's just a minor loss, I wouldn't even bother, but because I wanted to start the new year right, I reached out to my relations manager over at E-Trade, explained what happened. He looked into it, got back to me, told me there was an issue on their end, and thankfully gave me the full credit back of $320, so shout out to Britain for helping me out. Then the rest of the morning really couldn't get anything going, even though we had a lot of gaps. They just either didn't set up right or were just too spready for me. Until in the afternoon, I saw the WE giving a sell setup off a penny base. Got in it short, but then pretty much took all afternoon to get it to move. Added to it on the 15-minute 123 secondary entry on the way down, trying to get filled what I can since it was on an uptick, and ended up following through to the low of the day and more. Unfortunately, I got out a little bit too early, which adds up to over $1,000 I left on the table, but it was still a nice play. Just glad I was able to get something going right at that last hour of the day, that magic hour, to lock in over 2,400 to start the week. Now the credit of the 320 from earlier doesn't show in the P&L, but if I go into my E-Trade activities page, you can see the 320 got credited back into my account, just in case you're wondering about the math. Then on Tuesday was the opposite. I had a very small gaps list, didn't have a lot of favorites. I did like and watch the VORB for the open. It was gapping down to new all-time lows, got in some short, but ended up trailing out early over the 2 minutes 123 bars high, which ended up being a good trail because it got bought pretty hard. But really wish this would have followed through because the rest of the day was extremely quiet for me. You know, there's slow days where there are interesting things to watch, but they just don't set up right. And then there's slow days where there's just nothing interesting to watch at all, which was pretty much today. Minus that VORB I tried. Was hoping anything would come up in the last hour here like yesterday, but couldn't find anything, and that was it. Wednesday was more interesting. There were a lot of penny stocks gapping this morning, so that's kind of what I decided to focus on. I went long the JAG-X at the open, which gapped up today trying to end the downtrend on the daily. The problem with such a low price stock like this one in the 10-cent range is just a penny move is a 10% move on the stock. So wasn't expecting a huge move out of these, but it looked good for a second until it didn't. Spread opened up, started flipping around like a Chinese gymnast, so I trailed it to the topping tail bars low on the 2-minute. Was actually up in R, but ended up trailing out unfortunately. Then tried the Excella long off the bottom, another very low price penny stock trying to end the downtrend on the daily. Was also looking good to start the move, but couldn't follow through, so ended up trailing out on the igniting bars low. Tried a few other penny stocks like the TNXP, which wasn't available to short, and sell U, but none of them got going, so I guess I went after the wrong things this morning because there were some nice moves on like the Triple BY and the LASE that I know others capitalized on. Then in the afternoon, I saw this BVS penny basing for lower on the 5. It was pretty thin and on an uptick, so I got filled very little. Would have been nice if I got filled any decent size because it did work, so made a little bit on that, then just ended up dabbling on things the rest of the afternoon, and another day where I couldn't get anything going. Then Thursday, my first trade was the CVAC. Came across this just as it was about to trigger a 123 off the 5-minute. This was on my gaps list, but wasn't watching it for the open because I didn't think it was clearing anything on the daily. But here it is, trying to take out a couple of big bottoming tails, also ending the hourly uptrend, so made the quick decision to get into it short. Got partially filled, so was a bit undersized and wasn't expecting the spread to open up, so left my share sizing alone. Followed through really nicely and was trailing half my position on the 1-minute. Market was also getting sold off hard this morning. And as they both started to come in pretty hard, I decided to now trail the entire position and timed it with the bounce in the market to exit the trade for a profit. So even though I was undersized, it still made just shy of 2 Rs for me to start the morning. Then the afternoon, there were a couple of climactic watches that were interesting, like this ARVL, but wasn't available to short for me. CVNA was also going climactic, but didn't like the setup. Most interesting one for me was this Arlay, but ran out of time in the market, so couldn't do it, never triggered, which gives me another afternoon where I didn't do anything. And finally, Friday, today earnings season officially kicking off with the banks and airlines reporting, but I went after the CBIO at the open. It was one of the bigger gaps this morning, gapping down over 50-something% or so. Was watching it for either direction on the break of the 5-minute. Looked lower, so I got into a short once it triggered. Got filled only half my size. The upticks have been annoying because I'm not getting filled the right amount, but wasn't really sensing the momentum. It wasn't really trading or moving. It was kind of acting like a secondary offering, but it wasn't. But not exactly sure what the news was on this until someone pointed out it was a special dividend. So I didn't know if this thing was going to go anywhere. So because of that, I decided to trail 15-minute bar by bar, which would be no worse than break even. I wasn't planning to lose on this trade, but it started to break down and go, so I decided to tighten up the trail since dividends aren't real gaps. So as it dropped on the 5-minute on volume, I decided to take it. Got slippage on the way out because it wasn't very liquid, but still made about an R with the partial shares I got filled. But in this case, I think I would have done better if I didn't know it was a dividend because it continued to drop over an R and a half or so, and knowing that kind of affected the management on it. Then it went dead again for me the rest of the afternoon. I mean, there's always things to do, like Newegg was definitely moving in the afternoon, but I like to stick to what I know and I'm comfortable trading, which I think helps me stay out of trouble. So I decided to take the 600 I'm up today and call it there. Not the most interesting week, but wanted to show how I'm starting the new year. We're in the dawn of earnings season, so right now isn't the time for me to be aggressive, and I think it's also good to show you slow weeks to know that it's not always about making tens and thousands of dollars every day and week. You heard the saying thousands of times, right? This is a marathon and not a sprint. And this week, I just kept my head above waters, making what I can until hopefully earnings season picks up in the next couple of weeks. And once it gets busier, then I can dial up the aggression and extract as much as I can when it's good and hold on to what I have when it's not. So ending the week up about 4,800. Hope you enjoyed this one. Leave a like if you did. Hope your new year is off to a great start. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As always, I appreciate you for being here, and I hope to see you on the next one.